How often in life do you come across a situation where there's some level of confusion or uncertainty around the situation that you're dealing with? Chances are that happens pretty frequently because that tends to be how life works. In this video, I want to share how you might approach that uncertainty and confusion by making use of simple tools like pen and paper. Welcome to Verbal to Visual. I'm your host, Doug Neill, and I want to start by sharing what it looks like, what it feels like to experience some sense of doubt. To do that, I'm going to sketch out a person right here who is in a situation where they're facing confusion and doubt, uncertainty. It's not particularly a pleasant feeling, and I feel like it's worth acknowledging that it is both a feeling and it's a state of mind that might feel a bit like that. The feeling of doubt often brings with it a degree of tension. There's often an element of confusion, maybe something that feels a little bit like a brain fog. So I feel like it's worth being explicit here that doubt is often a felt experience in the body, as well as a cognitive experience of some sort of confusion or uncertainty when you're in a complex situation or perhaps studying a complex topic that you're trying to make sense of and you're trying to decide how to move forward. I'll bring in an example from my own life. Right now, my wife and I are considering a potential move, a move from the city to the country. And we are wrestling both with whether or not that is a move that we for sure want to make, and if so, the timing of it. So I have often felt and thought in this way when considering the question, are we ready to move? What are the implications of that? What are the things that we need to be thinking about? How can we best make this decision together as a family? My main suggestion here is to get these feelings and these thoughts out of your head and onto a page so that you can work with them. I encourage you to sketch things out with whatever materials you happen to have on hand. Maybe it is a sketchbook or notebook of some sort. Maybe it's index cards or sticky notes. Maybe it's a tablet. And what I want you to do here is give all the details that you're thinking about room to breathe. All of the concerns here, all of the considerations, if they're stuck in your head or in your heart, they're much more difficult to work with. It's easy for them to stay jumbled up, twisted, and tied together. But if you systematically give them space, literally on a piece of paper, writing the word or idea down, putting a box around it, writing the next detail down, putting a box around it, perhaps start making some connections between the things that are coming up. Note which of the things are related to each other and how. Start to build out a picture, even if it's just with words and boxes and lines connecting things, so that instead of trying to process all of that information inside your own body, you have something external to work with. When you sketch things out in the form of a diagram or a drawing, two important things are happening. First, there is an element of cognitive offloading. Instead of relying on your working memory to try to make sense of all of the details surrounding the situation in front of you, you offload some of that onto this external thing, a piece of paper, your tablet, sticky notes, so that you don't have to hold all of those pieces in your mind. You can see them and you can interact with them via this extension of the brain. Cognitive offloading is one of the primary benefits of sketching things out. But in this case in particular, there's another benefit that I feel like doesn't get quite as much attention or credit, and that is an element of emotional offloading. Once you start to put things down on paper, once you can see them individually and also see how they are connected to each other, that starts to relieve some of this tension that you feel when you come into contact with the uncertainty, the confusion, the doubt that you're facing. In a way, you're giving that doubt, that confusion, you're almost turning it into a character of sorts that you get to interact with. You get to have a conversation with these in a way that's hard to have when it's stuck in your heart or in your head. What that looked like for my wife and I as we continue considering this question of whether or not we're ready to move, I started by putting up a big piece of poster paper on the wall. This large scale format is my favorite way of working. And I started by looking at, okay, let's start with our home here in Portland. If we were to move, what were the things that we would need to do, to take care of, to fix up, to get ready for a transition to someplace new? What are all of the individual projects that we might take on to get this home ready to sell, to get our belongings ready to move? Which of these are perhaps DIY projects that we can take on ourselves? And which might we need to hire out for? And how much might those things cost? And then what might we want our future home in the Eugene area to look like? Does it need to be a bit bigger than our current place? How much land and nature do we want surrounding us, since that's part of our desire to move away from the city? What are the ideal conditions of this home, and maybe non-negotiable ones? And perhaps price-wise, how much of a down payment would we need based on prices that we're seeing when we look on Zillow? What will our monthly mortgage look like? And are we prepared for that? What might the transition period from this home to that look like? How long might we be willing to stay with my parents who live in the area? Do we want to rent for a while instead if we can't make this transition directly? When sketching out the details surrounding this particular question, we get a much better sense of what this transition would actually look like. We can better imagine the process of getting this home ready to sell and making the move. We get a sense for our requirements for the new home, including the financial responsibilities associated with it. And we can start to picture what the transition period looks like. We have therefore offloaded many of the details that we need to be thinking about as we consider this question, and we offload some of the emotional weight associated with this type of transition by giving it space to breathe, which then allows us to start considering the next step, which is outlining your options and ultimately making a decision. Which direction would you like to go? What even are the potential directions? So here what you're doing is you're mapping out your options, your potential paths forward. You can label them. You can name them. For us, we might decide to stay in Portland for one more year perhaps. And we can define for ourselves, okay, if we do stay, what might we like to prioritize over the next couple of years to get us more ready for this particular transition? Maybe we decide that renting in Eugene is a good way to ease the transition, give us more flexibility for finding the ideal home. Hopefully this is the last time in our lifetimes that we make a move. Or maybe we decide to wait until we can make the move directly. What might the steps be to go down that path? After sketching things out, we're fairly sure that making the move directly is probably the best way forward for us if the stars happen to align. And to prepare for that, the next thing that I sketched out was a simple timeline. Let's assume that we are going to move. What are we going to need to do perhaps in each quarter of this upcoming year in order to be ready to move come fall perhaps? What are the milestones that we want to have on our radar? And when are we going to need to make some absolute decisions around, okay, this is the year that we're going to move? This then is another component of a picture that we can see that, once again, offloads some of the thinking and some of the emotional weight around this transition, because we now know what needs to happen when. And even though we've spent this time sketching out these details about this transition, it doesn't remove 100% of the confusion or uncertainty, 100% of the doubt. There's still some of that there. You can't remove all of the uncertainty from a given situation because the world is too complex. You can't predict all of the things that are going to happen in the future. What this house might go for here in Portland, what houses are on the market in Eugene when it comes time for us to move. But what this type of sketching things out does for us is it creates a little bit of a map for us to help us navigate that uncertainty, to plan for it as much as we can. And perhaps most importantly, this sketching out of ideas, this physical piece of paper that I can take home and show my wife, it gives us something to have a conversation about. It's this third thing that we can reference that supports all of the conversations that need to take place about this type of decision. And even just having that third thing removes some of the confusion, some of the doubt, some of the potential tension that can arise if you're just chatting with someone about complex ideas like this. That can be true in your personal relationships and also at work. How often do your meetings run in circles because people just keep talking over each other or repeating the same thing or falling into emotionally driven, non-constructive, combative conversations? What if instead of those conversations you had some form of a map sketched out that can evolve with you, that folks participating in that conversation can contribute to? When I took this sketch home, we continued adding to it. This type of sketch can grow with you, can be iterated upon, but it needs to have a starting point, and it requires someone, perhaps you, to make the decision to pick up the pen, go to the board, and start getting these things down. Start identifying the important details, how they might be connected to each other. And that is what I encourage you to do. I encourage you to be that person who chooses to lean into that uncertainty. Perhaps lean into a little bit of discomfort that you might have to be the person making marks on the wall. In the act of doing that, of making these marks, you will be making meaning of the situation, not just for yourself, but also for the group that you're working with. And that's an invaluable contribution. If you would like to dive deeper into these skills, better develop your ability to sketch out ideas, that's something that I teach. So I encourage you to go explore the resources at verbaltovisual.com. Here I am supporting both individuals who want to develop these skills through things like online courses. And I'm also starting to think about what it would look like to host workshops for organizations so that an entire team can develop these capacities and therefore do better work together. Make sense of the complexities and uncertainties that your team encounters every day and better decide your options for moving forward. If we decide to say goodbye to Portland, I will have to say goodbye to this office with huge windows, sometimes get some reflected light coming in here. But I've already seen some good options in the Eugene area. And since we're going for a slightly more country lifestyle, maybe I'll end up building a home office that can live right next to the huge food forest that I want to grow. That's a part of my vision for the future that we're starting to think about and work toward. Thank you so much for watching this video. Good luck as you start to or continue to sketch out the interesting ideas that you're working with, the challenging situations that you face in your life, the perhaps sometimes weighty decisions that you need to make. And stick around for more on how you can use simple tools and simple marks to help you make those decisions. Thanks again. We'll see you in the next one.